Welcome to today's webinar. It'll be just a chat on how did we become conscious. I can't say we're necessarily going to answer the question, but we're certainly going to explore it in depth. It'll be a discussion, as you see on the screen, of our awareness of being conscious and our speculating about the emergence of consciousness as a result of the ever-increasing evolution of organization from the atom to the brain. Now that's a unique way to begin, because that is not necessarily what people believe about consciousness or its evolution. Some want to reduce it to the level of what certain nuclei on the brain do, the emergence of holograms. I mean, there's a lot of speculation right before probably Sophocles and Plato. Probably Neanderthal men and women had discussions about what's going on between them as they witnessed from one another a communality, and as things emerged with language and with behavior. But I'm going to make a proposal, which is something I've rarely done, although the Lost Commons, the book, made a few proclamations, and we discussed those over the last couple of months. But the Lost Commons, the Human Relevance Under Siege, ultimately led to that if we as human beings in society today are being confronted with such a vast array of forces, economic, socio-demographic, technological, regulatory, that human relevance is under risk, not just from AI, but from the rate of change and the extent of change. The book ultimately ends with the importance of know thyself. That concluded the Lost Commons, but has opened up the discussion of the second book, my second book, your second book, because of almost everything that I'm thinking about and writing about today stems from discussions like this over the last 20 years. This second book is The Mysteries of the Mind. And the opening is about, how did we become conscious, which is what I want to talk about today. But I'm going to share with you a perspective just to get to lead in, and it was specified in the newsletter. I'm of the belief, and I don't think there's much question, that the universe is made up of at least one force, and that is electromagnetic. And that we have at the level of an atom, even subatomic, what's called attraction, a negative and a positive, a proton and an electron. And that virtually all matter evolves or has as a subset this electromagnetic force. And it's not inconsequential to speculate that if all matter is comprised of electromagnetic forces, then we are a byproduct of all of that too. And the difference is simply the level of organization. And what I'm proposing is that from attraction through adaptation to awareness to sentience to conscience is a continuum. That physics is simply a subset of biology, and biology is simply a subset of psychology, and that it is really just one continuum. They're not separate. They're simply the identification of from one point to another. And it's very difficult to know when you're into biology and out of physics and vice versa. So my hypothesis is that the processes underlying consciousness are a byproduct of the evolution of increasing organization, starting with attraction and working right up to levels of consciousness. Now, the interesting thing about this whole topic, and what I highlighted a few moments ago, was when I did the newsletter on Saturday, I had no idea how much of a response it would trigger, which led me to believe that everybody in the network has some insight, understanding, awareness, or level of consciousness, and has something to say about it, or something they thought about it. And if not, they've got a glass of wine in hand, and they'll be giving even more thought to it shortly. But this topic has always intrigued me. It was evident in the Lost Commons, and it'll be even more evident as I walk you through the next few weeks. But today is meant to be wide open. I'm not going to have a webinar next week. I may not even have a newsletter. Because Tommy Nilsson, who's our perception researcher, and Randall Adcock, who's our designated philosopher, and a fellow named Steve Kurtz, who you haven't met before, who I designate as a thinker. as I would Roger Marchand and Haley Simons and Jeff Kramer and Jim Andrusiak and Greg Mc. I mean, the thing that you all have in common, whether it be today or in the various webinars that you've attended, you've impressed all of us with your thinkers. You're not dictators. You're sharing ideas and you're willing to listen to others. That's what the commons is. This is a representation of what I profess is so important in a society, no matter what the topic is that you exchange ideas without judgment, and we grow as a consequence. We grow trust, we grow confidence, we grow insights, and sometimes we even grow discovery. So that's where I'm at. The topics that we'll be discussing over the next some odd weeks, I'll share with you. I'll share with you right now because they are the chapters of the book, and they may evolve because the book is never finished. The first chapter was the great question, why the mind matters, and how do we become conscious, which is really just an opening. It isn't a closing. The second is about continuity, that nature doesn't leap from one stage to another, it evolves. It's an architecture of continuity. The third chapter is from attraction to awareness. I've alluded to that. I think there's a continuum. I think as nature evolves or as organizational complexity evolves, you move from a level of attraction that you can see right at the atomic level to a level of awareness that you begin to see in the biological, but you even see in mitochondria or in paramecium, at the very basic levels of single cell organisms, you see something that is more than attraction. But what you're actually seeing is the evolution from a purely physical state to something that's now organic. So even life itself is part of the evolution of increased organization in these processes. Then we get into the evolution of attention as the evolution, not a single thing, but attention isn't a single thing, and it evolves from a very primitive state to a very complex state. And in its most organized state, it's called selective attention. Awareness is very primitive attention. Selective attention is your capacity to isolate selectively and attend to only certain information as other. Your brain will do that, and I'm sure you're all aware of it. While you're all paying attention to my voice right now, but not hearing the fire engine that's at your door. The fifth is memory, which was my master's degree, the architecture of time, memory, how something goes in and gets stored and is there evermore, or gets modified somewhat by other processes. But that memory itself, when it emerges in evolution, becomes a substance that's critical for attention. I probably should have put memory before attention because memory must show up before selective attention does, or attention has showed up, but the evolution of attention was when memory emerges as a process, because then it can be selective. It can assess whether it has ever experienced this stimulus before, this event before. It needed memory in order to do that. So in order to have selective attention, you had to have memory. So you can see the evolution of these various processes and the increasing complexity that leads to a higher level of functionality, which ultimately leads to consciousness. So then the next chapter was perception. And we'll probably embarrass Tommy again by diving a little bit deeper into perception than we do in 2 weeks from now, when we'll simply be in a way revisiting this introduction. But rather than it being an open discussion like I'm having now, I'll be inviting Tommy as our perception researcher and Randall Adcock as our resident philosopher, and a fellow named Steve Kurtz out of the US. I'm not portraying him as someone who's overly educated, overly involved in this topic, but he's a thinker. And you stir up his thinker and he'll throw your thinking back. And it's fascinating to listen to these three that I'll moderate that panel 2 weeks from now on August 6th. The chapter after that is we finally arrive at consciousness, the witness within, what consciousness does to enable us to be aware of ourselves. And then I move the brain from simply an internal inspection to the relationship of the brain to the external world, and we get into the social mind and how our mind actually evolves from being inward looking to outward looking, and that happens in infants and young children as they begin to become something more than simply an isolated singular mind, only aware of what's within themselves, to an awareness of the world around them, and how the mind evolves through social development to become a social mind and ultimately to become human. And then to me, one of the really exciting destinations is when we look at the mind as a source of creativity, which is one of the highest order functions of the brain's capability to actually create and discover something almost on its own from, well, maybe not from nothing, but from its own experiences and from the relationship of those experiences to what is occurring now within. And then chapter 10, artificial intelligence, we bring the mind and present it juxtaposed to the emergence of artificial intelligence by comparison. And I think, as Peter shared a few moments ago, within the last week or recently, there have been indications that as artificial intelligence or these data centers get massified, that there appears to be some indication that they are becoming sentient, at least to be able to distinguish them with the Turing test or whatever, seems to be indicating that they are demonstrating behaviors that are unexplainable other than the increased complexity of having these huge data sets emerging. And then chapter 11, we're back to where we began, which is to know thyself and the journey within, and what it takes to get to know oneself and to develop that level of resilience and confidence that one functions with a degree of independence and integrity in the world of change that we live in. And that will all set up the third book, which I don't need to get into now, but all of it as a foundation, that mantra that in time we touched, life and love will never be the same. And I went through a little bit of that over my last three days when I was on Salt Spring Island. But before getting there, I was taking the SkyTrain in Vancouver, or from the airport in Vancouver to downtown. And I sat in one of the seats in the SkyTrain reserved for seniors, and I looked at the train, and I saw silence. I saw maybe a dozen people all looking at their cell phones. And an elderly woman entered the train, and she sat down next to me. And she was silent, just like everybody else in the car was silent. So I, being me, leaned over, in time we touch, life and love will be the same. And I said to her, does anybody talk to anybody anymore? She smiled, and she looked at me, and she knew that I wasn't hitting on her. And she knew I didn't necessarily even have anything more to add, but she commented back. And before you know it, we got into a conversation about what we were witnessing and how we shared a similar perspective as older people looking at younger people and wondering whether anybody gets to know one another in any other way than through a cell phone. And then we got into consciousness and what we think about. And then we got into the fact that she was from Prague, Czechoslovakia, as was my wife, and how many common elements we had in the course of our life, as I knew a fair amount of what she also knew and had no idea that I had a brain that had memories and things in it and perceptions and emotions and feelings to share about and experiences that I had in places that she had. It was incredible. So another moment of in time we touched, and I'm sure I left her with a memory because she left there just shaking her head. And that's what we do. So here we are. It's up to you guys now and ladies to help me explore this topic of, so where did consciousness ever come from? Have you ever given this thought, or does it just live with you? Have you ever self-reflected about who is you anyway and where does it come from? I know you have, Roger, because we've talked about it in our seances, and I know you have, Haley, because it took more than a bottle of wine to get you to start becoming very lubricated on this topic. And Tommy, you've studied it for a lifetime from a research point of view. And Jeff Kramer, you've always got something to add, as does Barry. And Randall, as the philosopher, can't stop talking about the complexity and the relevance of it to our adaptation. So I'm just going to try something very unusual.
Oh, that is unusual. Okay.
Okay, Roger.
I'll start. But I guess we look at it from the biggest picture, and we're maybe trying to figure out, are we computation running on meat, or did the awareness come before the meat in a way? And in that sort of frame set, I'm encouraged to see some of the scientific community beginning to at least cooperate with some of the philosophical religious community. And we're starting to see this kind of a bit of a cross-pollination because both on the scientific mathematical side and the philosophical religious side, we're starting to point into the same ultimate directions. We're arriving at some of the same conclusions. And so, reduction and unification are all of a sudden, wait a minute, maybe they're just opposite ends of the same thing or different descriptions of one continuum. We're seeing cognition and experience. Maybe there's something that needs to cross-pollinate there. And so maybe it's like we're seeing the mind is this nexus of this phenomenological existence and some larger, universal, unified reality. And so that's in the biggest sense. So it's just encouraging finally to see, because I do think if we do this science alone, science has a blind spot. And that here.
Like that blind spot sometimes is because we get trapped in physics, or we get trapped in biology, we get trapped in psychology. But my point of the continuum is maybe to get out of the trap is to look at knowledge as a continuum. And that there's nothing radical in saying that, but we've created silos. And when those silos can't make a bridge, they then use the word emergent.
Yeah, I think though the structures of the scientific method is so embedded, especially in the last 300 years or so, this idea that everything, the reduction, slice and dice, and we lose the sense of the whole. The structure itself has limitation. An example would be just off my desk. I think most people know this is a vernier caliper. It's used for measuring things, can measure outside dimensions, inside dimensions. We can measure the dimensions of a space, but it has a very important limitation, this caliper. It can't measure itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that, it's only from that framework. I'm not diminishing science, but I'm suggesting every time science goes down the path of reduction, we get back, Perry, to your introduction where we talked about, maybe the Big Bang, where all this electromagnetic energy just emanates from an infinitesimally small spot. And interestingly, this electromagnetic energy is born with some duality, a plus and a minus, which is kind of how we describe and explain all the phenomenons we're exposed to. But we're at this point, it still doesn't answer the question, where'd you come from and why are you here, so to speak, that big, the problem of consciousness. So it takes this miracle. We reduce and we come to this point where we're stopped. We call it infinity, call it a miracle, call it whatever you want. So Occam's razor would say if you keep ending up at the same place, you take a vector outward, you get to infinity. You take one inward, you get to Planck's constant, infinity. Anything beyond that, it would suggest maybe we need to try something else or find.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking of keeping it simple. I'm of the view that it's been here all along. The view of continuity, the view of the evolution of organization, is not a complex concept. It's about as simple as you can get. And what startles me is that these traps of thinking in physics terms, in biological terms, in psychology, has been an impediment to seeing what's always been in front of us in the first place. If we only thought about its organization that has been evolving, organization of electromagnetic forces right at the atom level, leading to increased complexity and increased complexity. And with each, as complexity increased, these, what we call human processes, or from attraction to adoption or awareness and conscious. We're following. It's very easy to see that continuum without getting into reductionism. I'm not sure we have to.
Yeah, it sounds like Tononi's
Yeah.
mostly his premise for his work, and there's lots of other scientific, you know, theories and so on, and mathematical theories to support all of this. And at the end, I don't know if we reach that essence of awareness, I guess is what I'm saying. So potentially it resides just as much outside of us as it does inside of us, and it's consciousness looking back at itself.
Well, just in the discussion you and I have, or we've just exchanged, there are two dimensions to that. One of them is as we look at consciousness, and the other one is we look at human beings' capacity to have this discussion. And
Yes.
how do you have this discussion of yourself? And to the extent that we can actually do an analysis, we can appreciate there is such a thing that we're talking about, which is ourselves and the machinery underlying it. I've introduced it as our brains are simply the byproduct of a billion years of evolution, as atoms became molecules and molecules became cells, and somehow life emerged as a process in there, and cells became nuclei, and on it went. But it's not hard to imagine, and it's now possible to test this hypothesis of whether or not you have any breaks, or whether there is in fact a continuum.
There
Okay.
may be an experiential side, and I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Well,
That
the
that would
experience.
provide a more direct understanding, if you will, one of experience, one of
Okay, the whole concept even of experiential is assuming that people acknowledge. I mean, I think we all would acknowledge there is such a thing as experience, and we have them, and we all
Mhm.
have them, and we recognize them, and we even have an impact on our experiences when we do something really complex, like make a decision. If we make the decision, if we really have free will at all, or whether we're just watching our brains behave. That's a whole nother.
Yes, it
Then
is another
when I
topic.
say that, I got to pick up my glass of wine of whether or not we have free will, and whether or not I am just witnessing myself having this discussion. The self is just in there observing. It's a mirror, and I think I control it, whereas reality it's controlling me.
Yeah, I'm not even sure where the thought resides. I can't pinpoint it.
Well, that's the whole point. I mean,
Yeah,
if a thought exists, in what form? It's like a wave.
yeah.
We've talked about that in discussions over the course of the week as people jumped into this or jumped into this pool of, so what is the components of a thought? It emerges. Does it have to be reduced to a substrate like electromagnetic energy, or is it like water, a process as a byproduct of bringing hydrogen and oxygen together? It exists because waves exist. A photo exists, an essence exists, an emotion exists. These things do exist, but they don't exist in a physical form, which we seem to be compelled to want to reduce everything into some physical substrate. I'm comfortable saying, well, it all emanates out of electromagnetic forces. And everything else is simply more organization of those forces into things called cells and organisms and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, tell me, you're itching your ear. I know you got something to say there. You want to add anything early on, or just a conclusion and have the last word?
Well, no. Okay. So you're talking about attraction and attraction leading to organization. I guess what you're sort of leaving out there is that, yeah, there's the randomness of the whole process. And that's all just attraction of things, some things got together and just by chance they do. And if they come together and that organization is stable, they can tend to stay together. If it's not stable, they'll come apart again. You get various complexities that become more stable over an extended period of time. And from that, you can take the same thing in terms of animal evolution. Random things happen genetically, and the progeny may be slightly different than the original parents. If those progeny are more successful in terms of surviving, that bit of or additional organization, as you put it, continues to last. I don't what's confusing about that. It seems quite straightforward.
Nothing's confusing, but we don't seem to be acknowledging that as having as being as giving us the capacity to understand the evolution of consciousness. as you're right, randomness brings certain events together over billions of years, and the laws of probability apply. And as organisms, whether it be mitochondria, ultimately becoming controlling the elements of a cell, and a cell merging with another cell. I mean, yes, randomness and probability plays a strong role in evolution. And it just behooves me, and I'm more than willing to be put aside, close the book, and burn it, to say, well, it's so simple. Why didn't we discover it before? Or it doesn't explain anything. Well, if it does explain, then we ought to be able to do empirically, see whether or not the evolution of consciousness, going back to the evolution of cells, the evolution of nuclei, the evolution of functionality in the brain, exist. Of course they do. And I think we can demonstrate that. Haley, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay, that was quick.
But now I wanted to hear what everybody says first, and then.
Okay. I think the hand I saw going up was lifting the glass of wine. That's what it was. Okay. I dare ask Bogdan to speak up, because I know Bogdan's got a half-hour lecture to give us, but I will call on you, Bogdan, to see if you want to introduce. By the way, Tommy, was the point you were trying to make is there's nothing to be gained by this insight? It's too simple. It doesn't explain anything. It is.
Well, in some respects, it explains can explain just what is it that it can't explain. To put it the other way around. I mean, you got growing complexity. You reach certain plateaus where the complexity can be certain self-sustaining. Sometimes those plateaus can be detrimental because it prevents from further adaptation further on. And sometimes they're okay, and you'll get further complexities occurring. And again, if it works, they survive. If it doesn't, they don't survive.
But
and you can say the whole business of consciousness and arousal and attention is a matter of, it developed by chance. It was beneficial, so it stayed.
So we've given considerable credit to the theory of evolution, of explaining that mankind exists as a byproduct of X, but we haven't applied the principles or the theories of evolution to human processes. That's really all I'm doing. If it worked for describing mankind, why can't we use it in explaining the evolution of consciousness and where it came from?
Oh, hopefully, eventually we will.
Well, it all started in Edmonton. Go ahead, Bogdan. Go ahead, Bogdan.
Yeah, so I'm fully aligned with Professor Nilsson, if I can call it so. Evolution is there. To me, the seed is the definition of life as seen by Varela and Maturana. The concept of autopoiesis, ability to persist in time by continuously maintaining yourself, and that autopoiesis has two components. One is the intrinsic autopoiesis, the process inside, and the other one is the interaction with the environment, which is called the structural coupling in their model.
I didn't. What is that called?
Structural coupling. Structural coupling. It's
Coupling,
the relation between the living entity that self-maintains and its environment, its context.
Mm-hmm.
And that structural coupling, which is present and identifiable with labeled chemical processes in the cell and so on, that structural coupling is what builds a model of the outside world and what helps the cell to persist in time, to keep itself running for a while. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is the seed of consciousness.
And that process has to be present in order to explain some of the behavior, some of the features of consciousness.
Yes, and Varela and Maturana are specifying it. They don't call it consciousness as much as I remember.
Right.
out of their work, but they state that that kind of mapping and modeling of the context it's
Sure.
strictly necessary for
Yeah.
life. And
Well, yep. Okay.
from that point on, and I apologize, from that point on, it's a recursive process. So one cell divides in two cells, it forms a community. The community becomes an autopoietic entity that has a relation with the outside. Hence, you develop another layer of consciousness around the community, and the community divides and forms communities that collaborate, and that form surrounding a boundary and so on. And it scales up all the way to humans.
So and with
And
that
above.
with that scaling, A plus B is more. You get synergy. You get more than the
Yeah,
sum. You get
A
more.
plus
You get
B is
more than
more than A plus B.
you get more than the sum of its parts, which means
Yes,
something emerges that wasn't there in the first place, like water, is more than hydrogen and oxygen. That is
yes,
it. Okay,
yes, yes.
got it. Yeah,
And it,
and what I'm posing is we see that through the entire continuum of evolution of organisms.
right,
We see it
right,
throughout the entire universe with the emergence of the universe and how there is increasing complexity. So the concept of organization exists. The concept of the laws of probability exists. The existence of I mean, we've got the forces all there. How do they all interweave
yeah.
to explain the evolution of something as simple as attraction to awareness? I was intrigued this week to see an analysis of the behavior of a mitochondria, one of the simplest
Right,
organisms. It is a
right.
very, very complex, what all the biochemistry of mitochondria are capable of doing in adapting to the environment they exist in.
Yes. And if you want to go downward, so to speak, there are pre-cellular entities, unities of life that self-maintain prior to the invention of a
Sure.
boundary, of a membrane, so to
Well, I
speak.
mean,
And
look at the evolution of DNA.
yeah,
And you get billions of years is a long while. Randomness is a major process. Laws of probability do apply. Something does happen, and if that something has functionality and the rest falls by the wayside, it evolves.
and by far, I don't want to minimalize or minimize or forcefully simplify, but the core mechanism that develops all this complexity is it seems to me to be extremely simple ultimately.
Yeah.
And current AI development, um, because it handles knowledge and it handles abstraction of knowledge and processing of patterns that are actionable patterns, so to speak, brings in introspection that it's just a personal joy to explore.
Okay,
And
I'm going to pick up. I'm going to pick up on a question that was raised very early. Peter raised it. There is an answer to it. At least there's a hypothesis on why we forget, and it has to do with something that Randall has spoken of frequently: is information overload. Forgetting plays a role because if we remembered everything, we probably wouldn't have selective attention, and we wouldn't have the adaptability. So memory itself has the capacity, and it's a fundamental part of the evolution of artificial intelligence as well. As I've talked to Richard Sutton, is forgetting gets incorporated into the algorithms, or they would already have choked in the trillions. And it isn't just that a memory gets forgotten, a memory gets transformed sometime into a more elaborate memory as memory itself interacts with other memories and creates new memories. So memory itself is dynamic, and what the brain does with memory or with whatever is encoded as, quote, we call it a memory, but the biochemistry of that memory is constantly being bombarded by other biochemistries, meaning other memories, forming new memories and changing old ones. So memory isn't static. It's close. And that in the book, I talk about there's a gorilla experiment. They ask people to count balloons. And they release balloons into the room and they have them counting those balloons. But while they're doing that, a gorilla, a human in a gorilla outfit, walks into the room and walks out of the room. And they asked the people, how many of you saw that gorilla? And most didn't see the gorilla because they're attending to the balloon. That's selective attention. There's lots of that going on. It's going on in your room right now. I mean, there's stuff going on around you that you aren't hearing or seeing or recording. And very, very little of what you have right now you will remember tomorrow or remember 100 years or 10 years from now. But the brain's capacity of selective attention is based on a whole bunch of other processes that allow selective attention to happen. And one of them is memory, and another one is emotion. And all of these things combined allow certain behaviors to occur. And what's fascinating is how quickly it happens. I mean, we're talking 20 milliseconds for a sense. Is that how long it takes, Tommy? From the stirring of the retina to the evoked potential to reach the visual cortex? 20?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Probably a tad longer, but
Well, that was my work with rabbits. It was about 20 milliseconds, and then the eye blinked after that.
Yeah.
If the signal was significant. If it wasn't, the animal didn't blink because it didn't attend to it. It entered the visual cortex, but it didn't hit the right cells that said blink. Phenomenal how that thing worked. And that's simply primitive to what Roger's been doing by just talking today. It all works that way. He's just a big rabbit. Bogdan, go ahead, Jeff Kramer.
So I just want to mention about memory first, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about consciousness, if I'm allowed here. But some people have eidetic memory, and basically they can remember pretty much everything that they
pretty much
experienced. Yeah, but some people like Temple Grandin claim that they can remember being born. And so most of us, I think, don't have memories that are like we can't remember like before the age of 2.
Sure.
And so something is happening in the formation of our brains where we gain consciousness, we develop these memories, and so that brings me to the consciousness part of things. We can definitely see that a paramecium is alive, but is it aware? It can react to
it can adapt. It can adapt.
Yeah. So at what point, on the scale from paramecium to human, do we actually develop consciousness? I mean, a worm can react to its environment. I would dare say that my dog is conscious because of the way that it behaves and interacts and has learned certain behaviors like begging for food and such like. So there is some sort of a scale. So is consciousness an emergent behavior from neurons? And I think of our guts, like people talk about having a gut feeling. There are a tremendous amount of neurons that are in our intestinal system, and of course throughout our skin and throughout our body. But researchers say that we have up to 33 distinct senses. So most of the time we're looking at just the 5 senses that we learn about in school, where you have things like sense of time, sense of balance, sense of heat and temperature, and all of these different things. And a lot of them we don't even think about in our day-to-day experience, but of course we do experience them. So yeah, consciousness is it's a very interesting thing, and I think about Penrose's work, and he thinks that it might be a emergent phenomenon from microtubules on a nano particle scale, and then there's also work by Julian Jaynes about the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. Written in 1976. Very interesting stuff. Anyway, that's my 2 cents here.
Well, I'm not going to pick up on all of them, but one of the early points that you made about somebody having extraordinary memory and some people having poor memory, probably it follows the normal distribution. There are going to be people that have exceptional memories, and people that have. It's a biological process. It follows the laws of probability, and its distribution in society is probably reflective of that. Peter, I'm going to pick up people who haven't spoken before I go back to Bogdan. Go ahead, Peter.
But just on this topic about memory, when I first started working with a professor at the University of Colorado in Boulder, I was blown away by his photographic memory. He had asked me to write a letter to the director of the National Science Foundation, one-page letter. I wrote a one-page letter. And after I gave it to him, within about 7 to 8 seconds, he said it needs a comma here, and that's perfect otherwise. I mean, I just given it to him, and he gave it back to me, saying he needs a comma here. And that was near the end of the letter. I learned to find out later, of course, he did have a photographic memory. It was quite amazing. I mean, I never tested how far back it went in his life, but certainly in real time, it was well demonstrated numerous occasions.
Well, we will in the course of the coming weeks reflect on some of the phenomena of the mind, and you've just cited one of them.
Yes, one of them.
I early on in the book talk about the fact that when I was at college, probably under considerable stress at one point, because I think we were reading War and Peace, and I was a slow reader, knowing full well I needed to graduate in 4 years. I didn't think I would get through it. I lost the capacity for words to have meaning. I could see the word, I knew the word had meaning, but it couldn't connect anymore. And that was one of the first times I became aware of how powerful and how dependent I was on this bowl of jelly on my head and some of the things it was capable of that you took for granted, only under a situation like that to come to awareness that this is a function going on within your brain all the time. You can tend to believe it's just you, but it's not you at all. It's a whole bunch of functions going on in biochemistry, interacting and memories. There's an ongoing fire going on up there.
As well as all kinds of other organisms that live inside us, especially in our gut.
Well, and coming back to Jeff's comment. So at what point in evolution does selective attention occur? I could demonstrate it in a rat. I could demonstrate it in a rabbit. You can go back some ways. You can see things in a paramecian, which is adaptive. That is memory. You can, with a paramecian, demonstrate memory. It's pretty primitive, but it will not go back to certain points where there's an electrical signal. But there are cases you can go back further, and you don't have that capability anymore. You can, with a tree, with photosynthesis, see that there's some biochemical reaction in a tree that results in it becoming photosensitive. So along the entire continuum, we have these phenomena. When you get up to humans, I mean, you got to be in awe of yourself. And if not in awe of yourself, because you're not really egocentric, be in awe of your friends, what their brains are capable of doing, and what they're not capable of doing, which is what my third book is about, is the potential that we have that we don't realize and we don't utilize. Go ahead, Randall.
I want to tell a story about what happened to me almost exactly 7 years ago. It's the day before my birthday, so I remember the date pretty close.
Is this going to warrant therapy?
No, I don't think there is therapy for this. I had what is called global transient amnesia, or transient global amnesia. There was I suffered a quick change in temperature in my head because I was hot and took a cold shower, so I lost my self-awareness entirely. I got out, and my wife got me dressed and took me to the hospital because I didn't know what was going on. I had lost my sense of who I am or what I'm doing. But for the next 6 hours, as she worked with me at the hospital and the doctors examined me and so on, thought maybe I had a stroke. I have no memory of any of that and never did have a memory of what happened in those 6 hours. even though they were interacting with me, I was talking with them, asking questions. I even had answers for some of their questions, apparently, but I had no conscious experience of those whole 6 hours, and yet at some level I was still functional. And I don't know what to make of that. I just put it out there to let people know that things like this can happen.
Well, I mean,
Had you had any medication that they provided, or you took any prior to the event?
No, in medication?
Yeah, any kind of medication. I mean, whether it was prescribed by them or something you were already on. I'm just wondering how it might have been triggered.
No, there was no medication whatsoever.
Yeah,
They
well, that eliminates a
eventually,
lot.
because I was out of Edmonton, they eventually contacted a neurologist in Edmonton who identified this as transient global amnesia, which the local doctors hadn't heard of. There's apparently only one case in about 30,000, and extremely rare that a person gets it a second time. But I did have it a second time a couple of years later. But it hasn't affected me in the long term. I just remember this event because it was so extraordinary, and certainly upset my wife considerably.
I mean, the brain is extraordinary. For anyone who has gone under hypnosis or watched someone under hypnosis, you can see extraordinary things that the brain is capable of doing that are unimaginable. Another one that I share with you that I went through was, and I think I may have shared this in the past, is I had been working for several months on the development of a 5-year plan when I was within government for the development of community services for a 5-year period. To accommodate people coming back from an institution who we were to help. And I had all sorts of staff providing me with input, and it was becoming overwhelming. And I went to a conference in Saskatchewan. I had on a raincoat and I had a briefcase in which I had all of those notes. I walked into the room. I saw a table above which was a light. I sat down, pulled out a yellow pad and my pen, and I started writing. Except I didn't start writing at all. My hand started writing. And it wrote for an hour, and it wrote that 5-year plan. I go silent because you have to, what I just told you is profound. What the brain has the capability of doing, and sometimes you were just a witness thinking it's free will. When I saw that, I wondered whether or not I ever wrote anything or whether my brain always did the writing, that I was just a witness to it all. And that's what I was. I was a witness that day to what my brain did. And between my hand and my brain, the self was simply a witness. That was extraordinary. But it did happen, and it's happened once before. Peter.
Well, I was going to say that strikes me, metaphorically anyway, and I suggest that many of us, if not all of us, have had this experience. When we're writing something, we really get into it, then the time just flies, right? I mean, I'm sure we've all done that. So, I mean, the only thing we're conscious of is what we're doing. We don't notice anything else around us. I mean, if the fire alarm went off, we may not even hear it. That sort of concentration on it. So there's a level of concentration that we can do that cuts everything else out.
That's another form of course, selective attention, and absolutely. Greg.
2 words, flow state. Does that trigger anyone's thinking? Being in flow?
Sure, go ahead.
You're playing hockey like you've never played before. You've written like you've never written before. You've composed like you've never composed before. And to me, there's a connection to a force we don't quite understand when that happens.
Some call it being in the zone.
Yes,
I think there's something. I think there's being in the zone. A lot of us live in the zone every day, but there's something beyond that. Being in the zone is 1 unit of input generates 5 outputs, let's say. Being in a true flow state, it's 1 to 10, 1 to 20. And you can't live there, but you can do amazing things in a short period of time.
Well,
I can give some examples.
I think
well, as a writer, I think when we say we're on a roll, don't interrupt me. It's that sort of state. You really got things are just flowing, and you don't know why, but they're just flowing, and you want to catch it while you can.
Well, I was sharing with my son this morning, almost in an apologetic manner, that when you are free of constraints, you find your capability of doing things far beyond what you realize. My example right now is when my wife passed away. I am a different person since my wife passed away. And it wasn't that she constrained me or angry, but I lived within a social context within which there were boundaries. I never thought about there were boundaries, but there was dinner time, there was lunchtime, there was emotions exchange. There were many things in that context that defined my behavior, that when they changed, I changed with it because my environment that was to some extent disciplining me disappeared. Well, the last 2 months have been extraordinary in terms of creativity, in terms of a willingness to reach beyond boundaries that I would have ever considered reaching before. I said to my son, I was almost apologizing, but he said it's been thrilling to watch it. And so as we watch ourselves, sometimes we see things in ourselves that weren't there before. And they were there before, but they were contained. So in the book, when we talk about the lost commons and we talk about what human beings in society that are oppressed by all of these forces, how they are constraining the creativity in our society and creating us at an individual level without us even realizing it until such time as we are freed again. Maybe that's called leadership, and leadership provides some way in which to take those forces off us, or an election. But more often than not, it seems to me we live in a world today that is compressing and constraining us and reducing our capacity to be free and expressive and independent and to have independent thoughts. And it worries all of us that children who haven't experienced those forces before may not be aware of them as we may be aware and have the capacity to do some resisting, are going to be more likely to be suppressed during the very early stages of their life, where creativity and imagination is just seeping in, and they never get to that state because they've already been constrained. Anyway, I'm reaching back to the old book and I'm reaching forward to the new one, but it is all about the brain's capability to be resilient. And what we've reinforced already today is the extraordinary capability of the things to do far beyond what we, whoever we, far beyond I, whatever I is, imagined. This blob of 1.5 pounds sitting on the top of our head is a miracle, not just in formation, but in terms of what it's capable of giving, far beyond the way we use it, and subject to abuse from external forces of constraint. Teachers are supposed to help us open it up so that it is so powerful that we can use it in the course of our life to solve problems and to discover. Instead of, we have an education system that seems to be about control and constraint. Here are the rules that you will live by. Go ahead, Peter.
One of the mysteries that I've always been fascinated by, and I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have too, and that is, no pun intended, because I'm about to say, when a child is about 2 years old, roughly, they begin to ask a common question. And the common question is, why? Why this? Why that? What's this? What's that? I mean, it happens around a certain age, in roughly two, in the age 2 to 3, and you see this incredible inquisitiveness in young children, and often parents and those who look after the children just try to brush it off more often than not. But I find it absolutely fascinating to try and answer their amazing stream of whys.
Well, the third book is entitled Whimsy, the Worlds That We Create, and it begins with children. And that the parents that give them the answer as opposed to giving them a little imagination, when they give them a little imagination, it triggers the question, is that possible? Or could it be even better? Or imagine
The other thing about children is when you start to learn from young children as an adult.
Well, that's why grandparent. That's why the richest experience of your life is being a grandparent, where it's not about control anymore. It's about imagination and the world of possibilities. It is almost an hour. I want to ask you all a question for a moment. I'm considering pausing for a week and taking a break and not having a webinar next Thursday, although this conversation I'm sure could be replicated or elaborated upon next week. Do you want to have a webinar next week? The reason why I'm hesitating is I want to bring Tommy Nilsson in, and I want to bring as our perception researcher, and I want to bring Randall in as our dedicated philosopher. And I want to bring in a fellow named Steve Kurtz out of New York, who I've been talking about these topics with, as a panel that I would moderate 2 weeks from now. I can't do it next week because Tommy's engine broke down and Steve's got another obligation. So I thought rather than put another topic in, I just pause and come back to this topic in 2 weeks. Anyone want to give me a viewpoint on what your thoughts are? I mean, this is for you. I enjoy myself. God knows when I would otherwise get a glass of wine. But how do you feel about pausing for a week, or just have another week and do what we're doing today?
Well, I'll go with the flow.
Go with it. That was you, Peter. What are you about, Kevin? Yes. Kevin, you've always got insights. By the way, your chat over there was really, I don't know why we didn't pick up on it. Kevin, what do you think? Want to take a break for a week?
Yeah, that works. That's fine. Yeah.
You're being sympathetic. Barry, what do you think? You're sleeping. Okay, forget it. Yogi.
Well, I'm flexible. I appreciate these sessions. I appreciate the many comments and the diverse viewpoints. If you want to take a week off to prepare or go water skiing or whatever, I'm fully understanding of that.
All right. Well, I mean, the fact that it's a fairly common group, and I'm not at all concerned with that, but to that extent that we are a common group, I felt it only apropos to ask you guys how you feel. Are you, Haley, what are your views?
On life, on continuing next on the discussion, it's wide open. Perry, whatever you want. Like, yeah. Really, this is.
Okay. Well, I think I'll take a break. I mean, my garden's got a lot of weeds, and I got to get rid of the weeds. I do want to go back to the Mysteries of the Mind book. I want to do some polishing, even if it's just a byproduct of some things I've heard today. So I think I'll do the newsletter because I am obsessive compulsive in that regard. But I think I'll pause on the webinar.
May I offer a suggestion?
Sure.
If everyone is taking a pause from the actual webinar, just because this time seems to have been really ingrained as a pattern, as we've experienced. Consciousness is really a pattern. It's not something we can articulate. It's just a pattern that we can observe. So if we continue this pattern that we can continue observing and set aside this Thursday afternoon time for just a reflection, maybe you'll get some feedback that we weren't able to articulate or offer in this webinar now. And if you're willing to receive just a few notes from people, I'd love to hear what people think after the webinar as well, and just see all the thoughts, all the good stuff seems to, for me, I experience it happening sometimes well after the webinar. And if we can experiment with just continuing this through the next week, I think that would be an interesting set aside time.
So you're comfortable with the pause and just giving people a thinking time for 2 weeks? Because that's why I said the third party when I was considering who to have as a third on the panel. I'm just looking for someone not with a PhD, not even with a lot of thinking around but he's a thinker. He's someone like most of you. You're what I call thinkers. Throw a question out there, and I'll get a perspective back that isn't superficial, that you've given some quote thought to, not reflexive and not reactive, and that's heartening. That's what I enjoy about these sessions, because I think we're all learning from one another because we're thinkers, and you may get a different perspective than you ever have thought of. Sometimes in the chat and sometimes in the after party, by the way. It's not exclusive to what we do here. Mel, anything you want to add? Or Haley? Yeah?
I'm going to be off the grid next week chasing grizzly bears in Kananaskis.
Okay. So, yeah, I hear someone took down two grizzlies this week.
Yeah, well, actually what Haley just said was a thought that came to mind just as she started talking. I'm going to be out there with a group of, I don't know, maybe 24 or 30 seniors. Joined the seniors camping group several years ago, and we've been going out several times this summer, and we get into a number of conversations. So this topic might be good food for thought when I'm out there around the happy hours and
Yeah,
See if I can get.
make damn sure it's during happy hour
Oh,
because
definitely. It runs from 4 till 6.
they will peg you. You get into this discussion about self and the brain that they may or may not have thought about before. And if they haven't thought about it before, they probably haven't ever had any weed. But other than that, it's extraordinary to watch the behavior of those that haven't heard others speak about how what goes on in their brains to say, "My God, you too? You mean you really have dreams at night? You mean it's amazing what people haven't exchanged with one another about what goes on in their minds. It's phenomenal. It's a great conversation starter, and with kids
Don't
in particular.
don't forget to put somebody on guard because you're going to have those grizzly bears, and everybody's going to get so engaged in the conversation that if you don't have somebody on guard, you might get caught up.
Yeah.
Well, just ask the question whether they're conscious and aware.
Well, we had to put up with cows last time, so.
Okay. Okay. All right. It's 20 to 6, 25 to 6 here. Anyone add anything else? Any other perspectives before I at least end the recording?
Yeah,
I see
I'd like to add one thing, Perry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just that, so when we relegate all of our awareness to the activity of the brain,
Yeah.
yet people who are at least as much as can be measured brain dead in a near-death experience are capable of such incredible experiences, memories, profound revelations, whatever you like. This it's across the board too. So here we have a situation where, at least from a biological perspective, we can't detect any brain activity, yet this experience can go on for minutes, even hours in some cases,
Yeah.
and come back and relate it all, something that should not be possible. So it just opens the door to what else?
Well, that's what I say. It's the mysteries of the mind that is the focus of the book, and what we'll be doing over the course of the next few weeks is things that we never realized that one another have experienced, or things that we have heard of others. And it's an extraordinary organ, and we all carry one on the top of our shoulders. There was a hand up, although I thought we were into wrap-up mode. Okay, we can end the recording, Randall.